Father, we thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for giving us the cooler, drier weather and just making it such a beautiful weekend. Father, we just pray that as we meet together this morning, and that you would just bless our time together as we worship you, study your word, and fellowship with one another. We ask that your hand would be upon us, and that you would be pleased and honored in the way we conduct ourselves this morning. Father, we ask that as we sing, that you would blend our voices and our hearts together, and as we open your word, that you would open our minds and our hearts and you would teach us. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Now let's open our hymnals to number 182. What a friend we have in Jesus. Number 182. And if you're able to stand, please stand with us as we sing. If not, please sing heartily, rest in your seats.
All of my
down low on the waiting list? Where you're waiting for something, but there's other people ahead of you. I remember when Luke broke his arms and I took him into the emergency room, we had to wait a little bit. And he's sitting there with both arms broken and he was in a lot of pain. And as his father, I didn't want to wait a little bit. I wanted him to get in there and see a doctor right away. Well, eventually they got us into a room and then we still had to wait. And we had to wait for a doctor to come and take a look at him. And then somebody came and took a look at him, but they weren't ready to set the bones yet. And so we waited. And we waited, and then they were trying to get a hold of the orthopedic surgeon, and we waited, and we waited. And as a father, waiting for somebody to help your child is a hard thing. And it was hard for me, and Luke wasn't even in tremendous danger at that point. He was in pain, and he'd broken both his arms. But there was a father in our lesson today, as we look in Luke chapter 8, starting in verse 40. He was waiting for something far more serious than broken arms. He had a 12-year-old girl who was dying. And he needed to see Jesus about it. Now, Jesus had been preaching and teaching in his area just a few days before. But he and his disciples, Jesus and the disciples, had gone out across the Sea of Galilee. Remember, they went over to the land of the Gadarenes, and they encountered this man who'd been possessed by all those demons, and there was a whole incident with a herd of pigs and that sort of thing. But Jesus had been there in Galilee healing people. And it could be that this father went to find Jesus while he was still there doing the healing, but Jesus had gone for a while. He'd gone across the Sea of Galilee. And now when he comes back, he finds this father waiting on the shore, along with a huge multitude of other people waiting for Jesus. Luke chapter 8, and starting in verse 40. So it was when Jesus returned that the multitude welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And behold, there came a man named Jairus, and he was a ruler of the synagogue, and fell down at Jesus' feet and begged him to come to his house. Now, normally we didn't see Jesus doing a lot of house calls. He would stand out in the open, and these multitudes of people would crowd around him. They'd bring their sick to him. They would bring people to him, and Jesus would heal those that came to him. But the crowds were so huge, you couldn't take this whole multitude into somebody's home. And so Jesus was staying out in the open, sometimes along the seashore, and the people would come in droves for healing and for help. This man is getting on his face before Jesus, on the ground, begging him to come to his home and help this little girl. He begged him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. Now, it doesn't tell us what she was dying from. We don't know if there was some sort of an accident that had happened, or if she had contracted a disease of some kind, or if it was one of those things that you don't even understand why. But sometimes our life just seems to be draining from us, and we don't even understand the cause for it. For whatever reason, he knew his daughter was dying, and he had to get Jesus' help. And so he came and he begged Jesus to come to his house and help. But as he went, the multitudes thronged him. So it says as he went. In other words, Jesus said, yes, I'll come to your house. And he started heading toward the home of this man, where this girl was dying. But as he's walking, it says the multitudes thronged him. What does it mean to throng someone? I mean, we're talking about a group of people that are so intent at getting to where Jesus is that they're not really making a path for him to get where he's going. You're talking about people surrounding him. They all want to be close to him. They all want to touch him. They all want to talk to him. And maybe they all want to shake his hand or just thank him for what he's been doing. Or maybe they've got their own sicknesses and they're trying to get to where Jesus is so he'll heal them. But this whole multitude is just packed around Jesus, and it's just this chaotic scene where Jesus is walking toward, trying to get to this man Jairus' house. And of course, this man, his daughter is dying. He's in a hurry here. This is urgent. He's been waiting for Jesus to come back across Galilee, and now he just needs to get Jesus to his house. But the crowds are slowing this whole process down. potentially a very frustrating moment for his father, who's concerned about his daughter. Verse 43. Now a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any, came from behind and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her flow of blood stopped. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" When all denied it, Peter and those with him said, "Master, the multitudes throng and press you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" So Jesus says, "Who touched me?" And he's stopping the procession to find out who touched him. I mean, they're supposed to be going someplace important here. But Jesus sort of stops. He says, "Who was it that touched me?" And everybody says, "Oh, what do you mean?" And the disciples are just blown away that he would even bother to ask that. There's a multitude of people here. Everybody's touching you. What are you talking about? But there was something special, something different about what had just taken place. Jesus said, "Somebody touched me, for I perceived power going out from me." What Jesus is saying, that there was something about one person touching him, there was something different about it than about the rest. It wasn't just casually bumping into somebody. Power went out from Jesus and affected somebody's life. And he said, "Who was it? Who was it?" Now when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him. She declared to him in the presence of all the people the reason she had touched him and how she was healed immediately. Now think about this. Back in verse 43, it says that this woman had had a flow of blood for 12 years. She had spent all her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any. 12 years. Now I find it interesting that there are some connections in here between this man Jairus and the delay that's stopping him from getting Jesus to his daughter. How old was his daughter? 12 years old. This woman had had an affliction as long as his daughter had been alive. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think there's just a coincidence that Luke records both of those details for us. I find that interesting. I don't know what to make of it exactly, but I find it interesting. So she had spent 12 years with this flow of blood that would not stop. She had seen every physician she could find. It says she had spent all her livelihood on doctors, on physicians, and nobody could help her. You see, that's how it is with our health. If you're in pain, if you're suffering, I mean, there's no limit to what you'll spend to try and relieve that. I went to the chiropractor a couple of times this week. It's been years since I've gone to a chiropractor. I usually avoid it because I'm a tightwad. But I tell you what, this last week I had a reason to go to a chiropractor, and I wanted to get to a chiropractor. And praise the Lord, he was able to relieve some pain. He was able to help. But this woman, for 12 years, she spent everything she could, everything she had, to try to find somebody who could help her with this medical condition, and it wouldn't stop, and it wouldn't stop. Nobody could help her. Do you ever have a problem that nobody can seem to solve? Do you ever have something going on in your life that you try and you think that there's got to be a solution? So you try this solution and that doesn't work. You try this solution and that doesn't work. And eventually you're running out of resources to throw at this problem. And it just keeps on going. None of the doctors had a solution for her. And these were the experts. These were the people who should have known what was going on and how to help. Or at least they had the best chance of it. We have medical breakthroughs. We've had some huge medical breakthroughs in the last century. And even in the last few years. Amazing things. Ways of attacking diseases that have plagued mankind for so long. And we're finding ways to cure things that we could never cure before. But you know, there are still plenty of things the doctors don't know. There's still a lot of stuff they don't understand. they're mapping DNA now. They're figuring out what each little bit of information says on a DNA molecule. And they've been able to find a lot of cool stuff that way, some very helpful information. But do you know how much more information is on a DNA molecule that they have no idea what it does yet? It's huge. They've only just started scratching the surface of that. There is so much about the human body that doctors don't get. And it's not just the doctors that are the experts. We've got experts in all kinds of fields. If you need help with figuring out your family finance, there are all kinds of people who are experts who can tell you how you can be financially solid, and you can protect your wealth, and you can accumulate wealth, and you'll hear about seminars and books and people on the radio. And for many people, it works great, but not for everybody. And there are some situations that they don't understand how to fix. There are some situations that come up, they don't have a good solution for that. They're the experts, but the experts can't always help. Once in a while, you come across something that is so baffling to the experts, something that is such a problem for them that they have to kind of throw up their hand and say, you know what, I really can't help you. I wish I could. I'm going to focus my time on the people I know how to help. Sorry. What more can they do for you? The more we learn how to solve the problems in life, the more we discover new problems. We solve one thing, it creates a new problem. And many times the experts are unable to move forward with a solution. How do we solve problems of wars around the world? I mean, we've got people trying all kinds of different approaches. I mean, at some point, your political leaders have to make judgment calls between whether you want to sound tough or whether you want to sound nice, and there's got to be this balance point somewhere. Maybe this person we have to sound tougher. Maybe this person we have to sound nicer. And then at the same time, you got to say, well, do we actually have the military might to back up our threats if we're making these, or are these bluffing? And what are we doing here? And so many things trying to solve so many problems in the world, and so many of those problems are just bigger than what we can handle. Because on a human level, there really are things that are impossible. Now you'll find little Facebook memes and things that will tell you that impossible is not a real word, or some people will say nothing's impossible. You can do anything you put your mind to. I heard the phrase, you probably heard it too, anything that I think they say, anything that the mind can conceive and the heart can believe, you can achieve. There's sort of this go-get-em attitude that says that there is nothing too difficult for you to accomplish if you'll just keep after it, you just keep going. And of course, the proof that they cite are the people who've had success. You interview the people who went from rags to riches. You interview the people who tracked down the problem and figured it out and got to the solution. And you say, well, how did you do it? Well, I just didn't give up. I just kept trying. I just kept going. Because nothing's impossible if you keep putting your mind to it. But for every one success story that accomplishes what other people thought was impossible, you'll find hundreds of other success stories that never happened. You'll find hundreds of other people who beat their head against a wall until they had nothing left. People like this woman who spent 12 years and every cent she had, not giving up, but not finding a solution. Because with man, some things really are impossible. The problem is, if there was nothing impossible for human beings, that would mean that we are omnipotent. That would mean that we have all power, like God has. And that's simply not the case. We're created beings. We have a lot of power that God has given to us. We have the ability to overcome many of the obstacles that are put in our way. Perseverance, hard work, determination will overcome a lot of things in this life, but they won't overcome everything. If you can lift 300 pounds, but no more, then something that's 310 pounds is going to do you in. The reality is we have limitations. As human beings, there are things we can't accomplish. Now, in case you're not finding that inspirational this morning, I have some good news. We don't have to accomplish the impossible on our own. Because although you and I have limitations, although you and I sometimes find ourselves outmatched by life's problems, we know someone who is never outmatched by life's problems. And this woman, who had been fighting a medical condition for 12 years unsuccessfully, she tried all the doctors. She didn't know how to solve this problem. But then she heard about Jesus. And she came and she touched him. She didn't ask him for a miracle. She didn't do like Jairus and fall down before him and beg him to help. But she believed if she could just touch Jesus, that his power would come into her body and heal her. That's exactly what happened. Jesus said, somebody touched me. I perceived power going out from me. Now when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him and declared to him in the presence of all the people the reason she had touched him and how she was healed immediately. Now think about this for a moment. She's just given this testimony in front of the whole group. She's just explained what was going on and what's just happened. If you're Jairus, waiting for Jesus to get to your dying daughter, what's going on in your head right now? I honestly don't know what was going on in his head. I don't know at that moment if he is wringing his hands and drumming his fingers and tapping his feet and hoping she's going to hurry to get to the point and explain this and let's move on. I don't know if he's actually finding comfort in the fact that he's just asked the person who just helped her is going to come help his daughter. Maybe he was finding some comfort in that. But I think Jesus wants to drive home to Jairus that there's a connection here going on between what's going on with this woman in her life. An impossible situation solved instantly by Jesus. Because Jesus can do the impossible. Do you know he created the entire universe? We talk about having the title of this message is Unreasonable Faith. This woman had already been told by the experts there was no hope for her. If she had been logical and reasonable, you'd think she would have said, you know what, I'm just going to have to live with this. I'm just going to have to live with it. There's no solution. There's no hope. But her faith pushed her beyond what other people would have thought was reasonable. But reality is, it's not unreasonable to think that the God who can command the universe to exist, the God who holds every molecule together by his own power, the God who controls the laws of physics, and whenever he wants them to do something different, he does. The God who can control the wind and the waves, the God who can cast out demons, the God who can... It's perfectly reasonable to think that God can handle her problem. So when we talk about God doing impossible things, our own successes and failures condition us to think in terms of what's possible for God. We beat our heads against the wall and we say, you know what, this isn't going anywhere, nothing's going to happen here. This is too big a problem. I'm not even going to ask God about this. This is too big a deal. Or sometimes we think it's too small a deal for God to care. Or sometimes we think our prayer request is just too weird. But the reality is, God can do Now, as we saw last week, there are times when for our benefit, He chooses to tell us no on the things that we want so desperately. So if you're questioning, will God do what I want? That's up to Him. He knows best. But if you're questioning, can God do what I'm asking? There's no question there. There's nothing you can think of to ask God that He can't do. Now, of course, some smart aleck came up with the question to try and, to play on that, and he said, well, is God powerful enough to make a rock so big that He couldn't move it? And that's one of those, you just kind of twisting your brain into a pretzel here. And the answer that I heard from somebody was, yeah, but He's not stupid. The reality is, there's nothing too hard for God. So your financial trouble, the debt that's been over your head for so many years that you can't seem to shake, is that too hard for God? No way. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. All the gold in the mines and the earth and everything that's every dollar in every bank belongs to Him. He can handle that problem. What about marital conflicts? What about problems that you've had trying to work things out with your spouse and it just won't go and it just won't work and you've tried everything and you've been to all the experts. Can God handle that problem too? You betcha. He invented you both. He knows what makes you tick. What about sickness? What about diseases? There are some diseases man has not yet found a cure for. Well, you know what? God understands them. He can still cure them. There's nothing too hard for God. And I think Jesus wanted Jairus to have a little faith booster here. I think sometimes, until the experts declare something impossible, God's not ready to do the miracle yet. Because we won't know it's a miracle. We won't really grasp the amazing thing that God has just done until somebody declares it impossible. So while Jairus is waiting, there's this delay. And this woman tells her story, tells what happened. And God gets the glory for it. And Jesus says to her, "Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace." I think it's interesting. Jesus doesn't refer to people as daughter very often. Matter of fact, this is the only story in the Scriptures where I can find where he refers to somebody as daughter that way. Why would he do that? I think it was for Jairus' benefit. I think this was meant to remind Jairus of God's great love for people. You know what? Jairus' daughter was his daughter. He cared about her. She was also Jesus' daughter. Jesus cared about her too. And He cared about this woman that had stopped and it had this affliction that was supposed to be impossible to fix, and Jesus fixed it instantly. Jesus cares about His sons and daughters too. And if you find yourself worried on behalf of a loved one, remember that's Jesus' son or daughter too. And He loves them even more than you do. Verse 49. While he was still speaking, someone came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, saying to him, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher." At some point, you got to throw in the towel, right? If you've got a boxer that's out there in the ring and he's giving it everything he's got, but he's just getting beat to a pulp, At some point, you're in his corner and you're holding that towel. You can end this fight. You can stop him from getting the beating of his life. And at some point, you're watching the fight and you're thinking, he's not coming back from this. He's not going to come back up swinging. And he's throwing the towel. He said, that's enough. We're done here. That's what Jairus' friends were trying to do for him. Jairus, you've been fighting this for a long time. You've been trying to help your daughter. You've been waiting it out. You've been waiting to talk to Jesus. You've been doing everything you can, but don't trouble him anymore. This fight's done. It's gone. They're trying to help him. I mean, at some point, if you've got somebody that's still beating their head against the wall and there's no hope, you just want to help them move on. Jairus' friends were ready to move from save his daughter mode into grieve his daughter. They were ready to help him grieve. I think these were good friends. I think these were people who cared about him. I think these were people who cared about his daughter. And they said, no, it's time to throw in the towel. We're done here. Just don't trouble the teacher any longer. She's gone. But when Jesus heard it, verse 50, he answered him, saying, do not be afraid. Only believe, and she will be made well. When he came into the house, he permitted no one to go in except Peter, James, and John, and the father and mother of the girl. In other words, he gets to the house and there's this huge multitude, of course, that wants to follow Jesus, wants to see what Jesus is going to do next. And he says, everybody else is staying out here. I'm taking Peter, James, and John, and the girl's father and mother. We're going inside. You guys are waiting out here. And the crowd waits outside. But there was already a crowd in the house. A different crowd. Jairus' friends. Probably the little girl's friends. People who've been trying to help, but now we're just there to mourn and to comfort. Now all wept and mourned for her, but he said, do not weep. She's not dead, but sleeping. And they ridiculed him, knowing that she was dead. I mean, you don't have to have a medical degree to check vital signs. These were people who understood enough about death, understood enough about how the human body works. At some point, you can accurately diagnose and say, this person is gone. And they'd already made the diagnosis. They'd already given their expert opinion. They already knew what had happened here. And they ridiculed Jesus. And I don't think this was a good-natured ribbing. I think they were angry with Jesus for giving their friend false hope. They were trying to comfort him. They were trying to throw in the towel early and say, "It's done, Jairus. We need to move on from here. It's time to grieve. It's time to mourn. It's not time to fight for her anymore." And here Jesus is saying, "No, she's going to be fine. She's just sleeping." And I don't think they were all just good-natured ribbing and going, "Yeah, sure, you did it." I think this was an angry ridicule. I think this was a fierce mocking. Who would be so insensitive as to walk in at that moment and say, "No, your daughter's going to be fine. She's just taking a little nap. I'll wait for her." Who could be so heartless? But Jesus wasn't being heartless. He just had a different perspective on it than the rest of them. He knew how it really was. It says they ridiculed him knowing that she was dead. But he put them all outside, took her by the hand, and called, saying, "Little girl, arise." Then her spirit returned, and she arose immediately, and he commanded that she be given something to eat. Now, just to confirm here, her spirit returned. The people were right. She was dead. It wasn't that they were mistaken. It wasn't that she had slipped into a coma and they didn't notice her shallow breathing. She was dead. Her spirit had departed. And when Jesus told her to get up, it came back. Jesus had just done the impossible. And he tells her to get her something to eat. And her parents were astonished, but he charged them not to tell anyone what had happened. The people who had ridiculed him and mocked him, they were outside the house. They didn't get to see what happened there. And Jesus, don't even tell them. Don't even tell them what happened. When you and I encounter impossible situations in our own lives and in the lives of our loved ones, it's easy to fall back on our own expertise or on the expertise of others and say there's no solution for this problem. It's time to let it go and it's time to move on, cut our losses, and just decide that this is how it's going to be. But the reality is there's nothing too hard for God. Now again, taking into account last week's message, taking into account the fact that sometimes God tells us no when we ask Him for something. I'm not saying that God will always raise somebody from the dead when you ask Him to. I'm not saying that God will always heal the disease that's going to claim your loved one's life. I'm not saying that God will always bail you out of debt or help you heal quickly from an injury. Or I'm not saying that God will always restore a marriage or a family conflict. I'm not saying that God will always give you what it is that you ask for, what you feel you need. What I'm saying is, His hands are not tied. If God chooses to let your loved one go through pain and suffering, it's because He chose to allow it for their benefit and maybe for yours. God, in His loving mercy, often has us go through pain and suffering. He often has us go through difficult things, difficult times. But know this, it's not because He's unable to help. It's because He knows that this is better than what you and I would choose. I don't know about you, I find that a harder pill to swallow sometimes. Sometimes I would almost rather think of God as unable to help because then I don't have to feel He's responsible for not helping. I would almost rather think, well, there was nothing God could do about it either. I mean, it was dying, and the reality is, God can do it. There's nothing impossible with God. So when God chooses to do things differently than you and I want, we have to trust in His character. And the fact that His wisdom says, in this moment, this is the better thing. We don't have to understand it. We don't even have to like it. But we do need to know that God is good. And God is all-powerful. There is nothing too hard for Him. So, what that translates to in my life and in your life is that there's nothing we can't ask Him for. There's no challenge that comes into our lives that is out of His hands. And I find that comforting. Because when I'm beating my head against a wall somewhere, I can know that if God's either going to remove that wall or He's going to leave it there. Either way, it was in His hands, it's in His plan. And when I pray and I ask Him to remove that wall and move it out of my way, and it stays right there, I can know that that was His choice for my good. Don't ever think that something is out of God's control. Don't ever think that something is too big for Him to fix. No matter what the experts say. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank You for Your power, Your strength. you've got this. Whether it's the weather or disease, financial trouble, relational trouble, political problems, whatever it happens to be, Lord, you've got this. We ask that you would increase our faith. Help us to really believe that you can handle each one of these problems. And also, Lord, help us to really trust in your goodness and in your character when things don't go the way that we'd like them to. In Jesus' name. Amen. Let's turn in our hymnals to number 426. We're going to sing Victory in Jesus. Hymn number 426. And if you're able to stand, please stand with us.
He